I always like to get it to start off by just having somebody to tell me what they do. So when you meet somebody in that sort of elevator pitch, that 8 seconds of what, or I guess maybe actually a better way to do it is if you can imagine, what would you tell a 7-year-old you do?
Yeah, right. Well, I work with people and I help people solve problems, really, if you're looking at telling a kid about it. But I guess in terms of my business, Achievement Syndrome Limited is really it's a training and coaching business. We run corporate workshops and we do individual coaching with people as well. But it's all based on positive psychology. So if you're thinking of talking about it to a 7-year-old, it's really how you create a positive mindset using validated tools and techniques that are actually simple and easy to use that can make a difference to your day-to-day life as well as what you do at work.
Actually, can I unpick that term mindset? It's something that we use in our training forum as well. But I'm just curious, what does mindset mean to you? You're a corporate psychologist. What does that term mean?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think there's a lot of people out there at the moment talking around mindset. And for me as a psychologist, I'm a bit protective of it because it's used in lots of different ways. I think, people have got simple strategies they can use to get their mindset correct. But from a psychology point of view, it's having a range of techniques that when something goes wrong, you can apply those to correct yourself to do the best you can with the situation you've got in front of you. So that's how I would describe your mindset. It's really around having some strategies, some problem-solving ones that can be applied when our natural human tendencies start to take over.
Right. And to be able to use those tools too, you need to have sort of a bit of an appreciation of yourself and what your own responses to things are. So what are some ways that people can kind of build up their own resilience, I suppose, or build up their platform for their mindset?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at Achievement Syndrome, what we use is the acknowledge, act, achieve. So that's kind of a high level model that I use across my tools and techniques. But equally, I think the problem that people face is that they'll often try to divert to a strategy before they actually acknowledge what the problem is happening for them. And I think that's a big mistake. So, I mean, I think we talked about the UK economic study that came out around how we can go about refueling our tanks, how we go about building resilience. Before you apply those sorts of things, you do need to have a level of awareness. And I think that's the hard thing about being a human being. When we get hijacked, when we're not aware that something's pushing our buttons, we quite often divert to trying to do something, and that's where we can come undone. So I think if we're looking at mindset, you want to be aware first, then you want to apply focus action, and then you want to look at the results that you're going to achieve. Right.
So that sounds really useful. I think it's really important to bring that up. So it's acknowledge, act, and achieve.
Yeah.
And a lot of our members they're working in small businesses. They are working with clients. They're sort of often by themselves a lot. And I think that then in relation to that kind of thing, you really being able to acknowledge what's going on, being aware of it is really important. And I think one of the tools or one of the things that happened in digital marketing is with the pace of change being so fast, overwhelm is a real concern.
Yeah.
And especially that's just in marketing alone. But if you have a small business, you've got a bunch of other things to worry about. You got to worry about staff, you got to worry about clients, make everything go forward. Do you have any sort of tools to help people sort of be aware when things are slightly off the rails a bit?
Yeah, look, it's really difficult, I think, for small businesses and even for yourself if you're trying to manage yourself through those moments. I talk about conscious coping techniques. And one of the things that we know is that you have this little area in the brain called the amygdala that can hijack our ability to think clearly. So our cognitive processing switches off because something's happened. Whether that, as you say, it's a staff member, if you're a small business and you employed the wrong person and are causing you trouble, and then you're feeling hijacked around, well, how do I handle this person if they're not performing? That means that I'm losing this amount of money. So in a small business, we can go very quickly from feeling in control to feeling overwhelmed by a particular problem. And just being aware that there's this area in the brain called the amygdala that can hijack our processing, it's important that we know about that so that we can stop and pause and create some space for us then to apply some strategies.
Yeah, that's right. Often you just sort of need, once you become aware of the problem, then you can kind of give yourself the appropriate time to look at it. But if you're just reacting, you're probably not doing the best thing for yourself.
I mean, you might have seen, I mean, again, in a lot of organisations that I work with, that amygdala has definitely been firing for some clients. So it's a matter, again, coming back to from a therapeutic perspective, I always acknowledge that person's emotion at that time. If we move too quickly to the solution, a person either doesn't feel heard, they're not aware that they're reacting at that time. So we've got to sit with that tension for a little bit. So we do want to bring back to that acknowledge phase, and then we can bring in some of those conscious coping strategies. And then, look, you sort of mentioned before around what are some strategies that you can do. The UK Economics did some research. They identified 7 ways that we can manage our well-being or build resilience. I'll talk to you about a couple of those, but 1 is physical activity, 2 is taking notice, and 3 is actually connecting with others. So once we've realized that we're in a hijacked state, or someone's done something that's annoyed us, or we're reacting, what we want to do is create some space and then apply one of those strategies. I had a gentleman the other day who was about to shoot off a bit of an email, an angry one. He was definitely, his amygdala was firing, his cognitive processing wasn't working. And look, I didn't want to sort of point that out to him at the time. You've got to pick and choose when that occurs. But once we'd calmed him down and I'd listened to him, we actually just went for a walk around the block. So that's physical activity. So I know that I'm applying that conscious coping strategy for him. He wasn't aware. He walked it off. And then by the end of that 5-minute walk, and it wasn't long, he calmed down. The amygdala had stopped firing. It was an interfere strategy. And then we actually talked about what we could do next instead of firing off that email to that employee. And that's what we can.
We can testify as paying attention there. So the walking is simply doing that first of the 3 steps, which is getting some exercise, getting some space, even
some physical activity. I mean, not everybody likes to walk at that time. Again, that's where, from my perspective, when working with clients, I'm quite good at picking what will be useful for them. But I mean, another way, we also did the connection, like having an opportunity to talk with someone. And I guess in small business, as you were saying, we often feel isolated. So having a strategy to be able to stop and pause, identify what's happening, and then talk about with someone is social connection, which is another way it builds resilience.
Exactly. And then that stops from like the modern version of the quick draw today, which is that email, which you probably regret. So I think we've all probably sent a few of those. You're just a bit stressed and you get something come in, and probably should have taken more than 30 seconds to compose that one.
And most people like to be in control. So one of the things you don't want to do in that acknowledge phase is hurry someone out of that. Because again, the emotional hijack, the amygdala, it's a survival technique. It creates stress so that we can protect ourselves. So there is a time frame and a process that people need to go through. So if we hurry them straight into action, it can sometimes not be the right thing to do.
Right. So then moving on to the ACT phase of this sort of methodology. And is this sort of where the goal setting comes in, or am I off base there?
No, not at all. Like in some of the goal setting stuff that I do with people, in the acknowledge phase, I do what we call a values card swap methodology. So I look at what sits beneath the surface, and then we move into some of the clear strategies around what is it they're trying to achieve. And look, the goal setting stuff, I know there's quite a few people out there that sort of not a fan of goal setting anymore, but from what I know and the research shows, when you get clear about something and you're connected to the purpose and the meaning of it, then that's when those goals make a difference and you are likely to achieve them more. So we start off with that acknowledgement, then we move into the action. And in that action phase, when I'm working with clients, both in group settings and individually, we do focus on particular goals. And we also only focus on a couple of those because we don't want to do too many. We don't want to bite off more than we can chew.
That's one of the sort of the key parts of goal setting. I'm relatively new to this, but one of the most important things I learned early on is to set that attainable goal rather than trying to capture the moon. You want to sort of make sure you're taking that first step out the door. Yeah,
absolutely. Look, and the thing is, why goal setting goes wrong, and I draw you back to that values-based decision-making methodology that I use, is that often people will go straight to that action. They don't spend enough time understanding why they're trying to do what they're trying to do. And I think in business, we definitely have like our code of conduct. We have our values that we use as a bit of a compass for what business we're kind of bring in. And the same thing goes for an individual. But I guarantee you, if I asked a group of people that I do the workshops with, how many people know their values before they're setting their goals? Nobody puts their hand up. They sort of look at me with a blank face going, this is the fuzzy stuff, I don't have time for it. And then that's the biggest mistake, because we've jumped in from acknowledgement, we haven't spent enough time, we've gone straight to action, and that's why people don't get done what they need to do.
So this is figuring out your values as an individual and as a business is a bit of a reoccurring theme on this podcast. But I'm curious as how you get people started down that track. What are some of the ways you can elicit the values? Because most of us are acting on our values, but we haven't really articulated them. We haven't written them down. We haven't spent a lot of time thinking about it. But when you reflect, you can see, oh, I actually have been acting on those values, but I just never did it so much consciously.
Yeah. And look, it's most people unconsciously know what's important to them. And what we want to do is bring that through to our consciousness so that we can then make decisions, especially again under stress. If you've got a decision that you need to make, and often again, the amygdala will be fine, or we're feeling stressed and we can't think clearly. Without an understanding of our core drivers, it's quite hard to make a decision around what's right for us and apply what I call the art of sacrifice. If we've got 5 career objectives that we're trying to achieve, and again things are going into conflict, our values methodology actually helps you be clear on that, and you can go back to those. And so we've got a simple card sort activity. I've got 54 values that are on a little cards, and we time individuals, and we do it in group settings and we do it individually, and basically we get people to use their first natural reaction. We go through a process of elimination, and then by the end of it people end up with about their top 6. And I get people to focus on that top 6 because I think, a lot of people connect with lots of different values, but what you want to do is be very clear on what those top 5 or 6 are so that you can then use that to make decisions when you're in crisis, or when you've got a new client that you're dealing with, or maybe you've got a staff member that's actually not the right team fit for the business that you're running.
Yeah, and just some personal experience with that. We recently did our value test, and I apologize to anybody who's heard this before, but I use it as a decision-making tool. We had a client that we were kind of not too sure about, and we 2 of us were trying to decide whether we'd work with them, and we both knew that we didn't want to. And then when we actually looked at our values again as a sort of a reference point, I went, oh, okay, well, this is why this doesn't fit these values. And then all of a sudden that decision became really easy, and it was also one that we had no second thoughts on. So it was just that decision framework by checking it with the values. If it doesn't fit, okay, well, that's an easy no. And so rather than going on gut and not really knowing why, you can make that firm decision.
Yeah. And look, like with anything, if you don't plan, you can't have. And if you do plan, you don't have to. But I think what you really want to do is make sure you're clear on those values. Just like in business, you've got a business plan and you've got organizational values. You equally want to have your values understood yourself. So then you can make those decisions, and you can make decisions faster. I mean, I think one of the things that is quite challenging in today's world and social media world is that we have access to a range of options and information. So our filter, our ability to actually narrow down what's important to us is quite difficult if you don't have some kind of compass to draw back to. And so again, that's why I'm a big fan of, again, understanding yourself first before you're moving forward to your particular goals and actions in business and in life.
Right. And there's a ton of information coming at us, and it's overwhelming. And a lot of times people are struggling with their priority tree, essentially. What should they do first? Because there's too much coming at them. So getting then next into the actual goal setting phase, what are some tips that you can give in your experience, maybe not tips, but methods to help people make sure that they're hitting their goals?
Yeah. Look, I would say if you're pretty confident, you understand your values, and you don't have too many stresses in your life, then I would say set 3. If I think you've got a lot on your plate, you've got, a number of things that might be impacting you, then I would pull that back down to 1 or 2 important things that you're trying to achieve. Because what you want to do is make sure that your goals are aligned and they don't go into conflict. So that would probably be definitely tip number 1 for goal setting. If things are going well, you're confident, you don't have too many life stresses, then, 3 would be the maximum that I'd be suggesting that you put on your table. If you've got a lot of things going on, like, you've got kids and you've got multiple jobs and, maybe people are sick and unwell or whatever that might be, then pull it right back to 1 or 2 things so that you can minimize the conflict, and then you're increasing the chance of success. I think also that it's quite important to write them down. And I know, again, people think, why do I need to write them down? I've kind of got them in my head in this sort of fuzzy logic kind of way. it's really important to write them down. We know that from the research that 80 to 90% of people that write them down have got a higher rate of achieving those goals, and use a methodology to write them down with as well.
Right. It just sort of strikes me that your business is achievement syndrome, and so that it is a bit of a syndrome. But I guess
it's supposed to be a play on words, but as time evolved, because there is actually a condition called achievement syndrome. But we talk about achievement syndrome in terms of when average isn't good enough, when you want to get some insights, some positive coping strategies, so that you can play at the top of your area. And it's different for different people. But yeah.
Yeah. So I was just sort of thinking back onto the goal setting in what you're suggesting there, that when you're setting a goal and you achieve it, something good happens. But when you set a goal and you don't achieve it, there is a negative result in your psyche, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's why you want to invest a bit of time up front to make sure that you've got that connection and that belief in what you're doing, because often people set goals sort of in a random act or a knee jerk to something. I mean, we see it at New Year's all the time, don't we? Everyone's like, start a new year, get a new body. Like, it's always the weight loss goal. But whenever I work with someone, we really have to strip it back to why. I mean, if you believe in what you're trying to achieve, then you're more likely to get there. I mean, there was this interesting little research study that one psychologist did around belief. She actually got a group of people to come in and bring Lucky Charms with them. She said, look, bring them along and we're going to do a bit of a performance test. And they had like a simple memory test that these people needed to perform. And what they did was split the groups into two groups. They said, look, we're going to take your Lucky Charm off you, and what we're going to do is we're going to get you, I'm just going to take a photo of them and then we'll give them back to you. So half of the group got their Lucky Charm back. The other half didn't. They were told that the camera wasn't working. And they identified that those that got the Lucky Charm back actually performed better on the test, the memory test. So look, it's not to say to increase your IQ, take your teddy bear along. But we know in sports psychology, do our highest athletes, like the All Blacks, do they absolutely have a ritual that they go through that they believe in? Some of them stand on one foot and tap their nose. But the belief in your goal and the time that you spend creating that ritual is what makes a difference to the achievement.
Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah. So if you have a Lucky Charm, or if you have something that you do before an interview, then you're more centered, you're more focused. It's
that time and connection that you spend. Like, obviously a Lucky Charm, the people, when they were selecting them, it was something meaningful towards them. It was something meaningful to them. So if you think about it in the goal setting world, if we just ad hoc and go, I want to lose weight, and there's no meaning really attributed to that except for the fact that it's New Year's and we thought that's a great idea and we listened to a marketing campaign. That's the chances of that occurring and actually, coming off for you is less so. And then again, coming back to that UK economics study, we know when there's meaning in your life and there's meaning in the employment that you do, you're more happy and you've got better resilience. So this belief in what you do and the belief in the goals that you're setting, you want to spend some time getting close to that, so that you can actually set those 1, 2, 3 goals and then actually go to and achieve them.
Yeah, and then achieving them, of course, is giving you positive momentum.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you can do that again.
And again, those that don't, if you don't achieve something, then that's okay. It's just important that you have people to pick you up along the way. And so I talk about that as the commitment entity. We have T-shirts that we stamp people's life goals. So we put their goals on their T-shirts instead of putting goals on a piece of paper. That psychological contract that we create by writing them down, whether that is, you share it on Instagram or you share it on a T-shirt, changes our commitment. And then when we fall off or we get to a particular blocker, we have people that are able to help us get back on. Missing a goal or failure in life is normal. We've got to get used to that. But what we want to do is have strategies to pick yourself up along the way.
Well, and that's a little bit ties back to what you were saying at the beginning of the podcast about how having that peer group to share and decompress would be just as important in that that situation when you're being hijacked as to when you're talking about your goals and maybe some of the misses that you've done.
Yeah, absolutely. Like having that some people have that mentor that they have. We do the individual coaching sessions, and often we've got high executives that actually, they know what they're doing. They know their business and life, but we're human beings, and there's a point or a contentious thing that they've come across, and they need to work through that amygdala hijack, and they need that someone to talk to. Same again with goal setting. If we fall off, we often need to have a strategy that's set there for us to then pick ourselves back up, acknowledge the disappointment for the failure that we've just incurred, and then we need to be able to move forward on that focused action. And look, it sounds simple, but when you're in pain and you really had your heart set on achieving something and it didn't work out, if you're a small business and you're losing money at that point because a sale didn't come off, that's not an easy thing to pick yourself up from. There's a level of resilience and support that's required to get you through.
That's really good advice, and I think that's a really good summary of some of the ways that you can set yourself up for success, is by having a lot of those things, and not necessarily, it doesn't really matter on what field that you're working in, but if you have that support network and those strategies in place, you're much more likely to succeed.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can give you a personal example. I remember, this is a long time ago. If you Google me, you'll see I don't look like a powerlifter, but back about 10 years ago, I started weight training, and I really liked it. I just started doing powerlifting. And I said to my coach, I was like, oh, I might go on a competition. And he's like, all right. So anyways, I started training for this competition. And look, I told people about it because it was one of the goals that I wanted to achieve. I wanted to get to a certain weight and I wanted to compete in this powerlifting competition. So I told my office of people. A few of them actually reported to me at the same time. And they said, oh, look, when is the competition? We might come down and watch you. So I was like, oh, gee, I better do this now.
Yeah, now it's serious.
Yeah, now it's serious. And so, look, practicing what I preach, I was, I kept training and I was preparing myself. And look, a couple of days before the competition, what you do is weigh in to make sure you're underneath, the weight criteria. And then my coach said to me, look, they've changed the rules. You now have to wear the competition leotard. They used to be a bit more lax about it, but you do have to wear the leotard. So, look, I was not happy about that. And so this is one of the obstacles that came up for me. And I was thinking, geez, I've now got to stand up in front of, 16 people that I work with as an organizational psychologist in a leotard, chalk on my hands. It doesn't look pretty. And lift, 150 plus kilos. So I said, I'm not doing it. I went to pull out. And then I thought, no, I can't do that. I've shared this. I've created a commitment entity. These people are coming to watch me. I need to show up. And so, look, I showed up and I pulled 153 kilos. It was a personal best for me. But, I mean, the point of the story is I couldn't predict that I was going to have to wear a leotard. I think in business you can't predict that maybe you have a bad month or you hire the wrong employee. But what you can do is put strategies in place to create that momentum to push through those bumps. And so I always just think about being in that lemon leotard with chalk on my hands and doing the biggest grimace, picking up 150 kilos. And I didn't mention it was in the Queensland Regatta Hotel, so it was in a pub with all these random people as well. So that was a lot of intimidation, but I know now, and I also know the strategies that I teach people, that if you don't have these things in place, I could have easily walked away. And in business, when you're a small business owner, that isolation or not having that checkpoint or not having that strategy can mean that you give up and you go back to your day job and you don't carry on through with your small business that actually could have had a shot.
That's an awesome example to end on. Thank you, Natasha. That's great. I can imagine I would not be all that confident in some tights in front of a bunch of coworkers.
Short tights, by the way. I can see. I might post on my Instagram so you can see.
Well, if people do want to find you, what is the best way for somebody to reach out and get in touch and maybe sort of learn more about how they can help, or you can help them?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, you can contact me. I'm on Instagram under Natasha Kessler, or at www.achievementsyndrome.com is my website. So if anyone wants to get in contact with me, you can go through the website or follow me on Instagram or direct message me.
Right. Well, thank you very much, Natasha. That's awesome.